about Leopold's Book Bar Cafe. It's Madison's bookstore for night owls, open till midnight every night. They've got lunch now, and starting next month, dinner next door at their sister restaurant, Fabiola's Spaghetti House and Deli. Leopold's is also perfect for holiday gifts, by the way, with over 5,000 books and hundreds of wines. Head over to Greenbush and stop in at Leopold's. Today on City Cast Madison. It's the Friday News Roundup. This week, I'm joined by City Cast Madison's Hayley Sperling. On the dock, major outcomes from a settlement in the Wisconsin fake Electors case, a rate hike for parking in some city garages, and blow-up replicas of the leader of the North Pole dominating Monroe Street lawns. It's Friday, December 8th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. It's time. It is the Friday News Roundup, and this week I've been thinking a lot about abundance and gratitude. And I am grateful to round up the news with someone I'm extremely grateful for, Hayley Sperling, our newsletter editor. Hayley, hello.
Hello, Bianca. I'm grateful for you too. Grateful for this podcast.
All right. We've got a big story, a national story this week in our Hamlet. A settlement has come out of the false or fake electors case in Wisconsin, and with some pretty attention-grabbing statements. The 10 defendants who cast fraudulent electoral college votes for former President Donald Trump back in 2020 have admitted that they were, quote, part of an attempt to improperly overturn the 2020 presidential election results, unquote. This is from a lawsuit filed last spring against 10 Wisconsin Republicans who cast false votes and 2 attorneys that were involved with the scheme. In the settlement, the electors state, quote, we hereby reaffirm that Joseph R. Biden Jr. won the 2020 presidential election and that we were not the duly elected presidential electors for the state of Wisconsin for the 2020 presidential election. Wow. Hayley, that's some pretty big news.
It is. That's big news. Like, this is a story that people across the country have been watching because Wisconsin, of course, is a state that people have been watching for the elections. Admittedly, like, this is something that I've kind of tuned out because I'm just so focused locally. But this is a story that kind of just like made me stop. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is a big deal. And I think this is especially a big deal because we are on the heels of another presidential election. And, you know, this is something that happened not only in Wisconsin, you know, like there were other fake electors that happened in 2020 in swing states like Arizona and Georgia and Michigan. So to see this kind of resolve itself in Wisconsin, especially before the 2024 election, I think is really huge. And gives me a little bit more faith, I guess. Perhaps it's a false sense of faith. But, you know, it gives me more faith in our election system, in our justice system, in hopefully, you know, the inner monologues of people who know that they did something wrong and will now admit to it. So it's interesting. It's interesting that like it's ending with a fizzle more than a bang, but like I think it is a bang in the fact that it fizzled, if that makes any sort of sense.
It
like
does make sense. And honestly, this has been an unsettled issue now for 3 years. So I really hear you. Like there is something, I guess, a feeling of relief to just have clarity around this going into the next election for sure.
Yeah, this is something that has been submitted to a court. It's in the record. It's in the public record. Like, this is what happened. And there's no questioning it anymore. You know, like there were falsehoods. taken. There were falsities spread. And now hopefully people can go into the next election cycle with a little more confidence in our electors, hopefully.
Yeah, I want to share another loud, clear statement that came out of this settlement. Quote, "We oppose any attempt to undermine the public's faith in the ultimate results of the 2020 presidential election." I think that's huge because, as you said, Joe Biden won here in Wisconsin, fair and square, and they don't want to state anything to the contrary. And not only that, but they don't want to, quote, undermine the public's faith in our election. And I think it's huge because the January 6th riot at our nation's capital was so jarring for so many people. And that riot was in the name of Donald Trump. And in the name of Donald Trump being called to be the true winner of the election. And 5 people died. The AP reported that there were around 10,000 people who attended that rally in D.C. That ended up turning riotous and violent. Over 1,000 people, have been charged with criminal activity in that insurrection. People who claimed they believed the election was rigged, that Donald Trump truly won. People with tears in their eyes who felt like they were betrayed by their government. So separating fact from fiction is, definitely a step in the right direction. It also is, strange to think that there were Wisconsinites who were complicit. Spending a little time to reflect on that. And I wanted to, as I noted about the lawsuit, there's still a pending part to it for the 2 lawyers named. They are Kenneth Chesbrough, who grew up in Wisconsin Rapids, and former Dane County Judge Jim Trupis. They're, accused of basically crafting this electoral scheme. We'll see where that goes, but definitely some really clarifying things came out of this settlement this week.
Oh, yeah. I think the moral of this story is that actions have consequences, whether you face them 1 year, 1 day down the road, or 3 years down the road, for better or worse.
Indeed. Well, before we dive into any more news, let's take a quick break. Attorney Z. Usman with Usman Law in Madison has helped thousands of folks fight back against abusive debt collectors. And he wants to help you too. The average interest rate on credit cards today is 25%. So, for example, if you charge $10,000, you're really gonna owe a lot more than that in the end. If you only make minimum payments each month, you're gonna be paying that off for longer than you realize. You'll end up paying more in interest than you borrowed to begin with. And nobody's got time for that. But there's help. Attorney Usman can help you figure out how long it'll take to pay off your debts. Then he can help you find ways to pay them off sooner and for less. To learn the easiest way to pay things off, visit madtownlawyer.com to schedule a free call with Attorney Usman, the finance fixer. Another story going on in our beautiful hamlet, the City of Madison Parking Division is upping their prices come January 1st for several off-street parking options. Boo! I'm just kidding.
Boo. I get it, but boo.
Yes, exactly. This is for continued maintenance of our facilities. Woo! And improved service. So there's that. But man, is parking on the mind. Just to keep you guys in the know, of course, we wanted to give you this update and share the locations that are getting an increase. So pay attention to this. There might be, it might be a little bit more costly moving forward if you're not, sure why. This is why. At the State Street Capitol Garage, State Street Campus Garage, Capitol Square North Garage, Overture Center Garage, South Livingston Street Garage, and Wilson Lot. It's going to be just a tiny bit more expensive, and we'll link to the city's press release on that in our show notes for the finer details. But big picture, rates are going up.
And, I will say, rates are going up, but it's not, an insane amount, At the State Street Capitol Garage, the parking rate will go from 120 an hour to 150 an hour. Like, it's hopefully not going to break the bank. And again, I think we should note that these changes are going to go into effect starting January 1 of 2024. And the last rate increase that happened was in 2018. So
okay, so there's been a respite.
yeah, exactly. So, like, it makes sense. And again, like the city really wanted to take an ease on like increasing parking rates, especially because of pandemic and whatnot. And so that's like why the last rate increase was so long ago. So we are, kind of overdue. And also, like, in the scheme of things, Madison is a growing city and our parking rates are just like dreadfully cheap. Like, I'm not complaining about it in the slightest. Like, I was just kind of waiting for this shoe to drop. I have friends in Chicago who are just like, parking one day in Chicago to go downtown and do things is going to cost you like $50. And like, that's not unreasonable. Parking one day in Madison, it's going to like, the garage maxes out at like $5, like, it's not the end of the world. We're a growing city. It makes sense. The people got to pay the bills. We're coming up on a very, very steep budget deficit. I mean, this isn't going to solve that problem, but also just like expect costs to go up. It's expensive to live here, and like that sucks, but it's just the way of the world.
Yes. Well, now I feel bad for booing, but
I mean, I booed too, and I stand by it. But again, it's like, boo, but I get it, and it has to be done. It's one of those things. It's like, I will begrudgingly do it,
it's so true.
And I get it, and also like people have to go to work and do their things. And again, like the permit rate increases, like for monthly permits, like most of those aren't going like too much higher. I would say I think it's the State Street campus garage that is going to probably have like the biggest monthly increase. That one, the 24/7 monthly permit rate is going from $250 to $325 a month. But of course, like, State Street campus, it makes sense. Whereas places like, yeah, exactly. Like, it's hard. Yeah. And I will say, the fact that they've concentrated these increases on, like these specific garages and lots, like, it makes sense.
Yeah,
these are places that a lot of like out of towners come from, people who like aren't necessarily local to Madison, because if you're local, like, you're probably walking to State Street or taking the bus. Shout out to our bus drivers out there.
Shout out to our bus drivers, and shout out to the people who are like servicing these parking garages.
I get it. And like, shout out to the parking enforcement people. Like, people get mad at them all the time, but again, like, I feel for them, because as a journalist, it's just like, I'm just trying to do my job, and sometimes people are mad at me, and I think that's probably how they feel a lot of the time.
I'm one of them. I will not shout them out, and they are still doing their job. I do have a little bit of a vendetta.
No.
But I'm glad that you brought that up, because my vendetta is not really with them. It's not with the people. And I'm never, impolite or anything like that.
No.
And the
never.
problem with me is like where I live, parking is so hard, and it's gotten even harder. You have to move your car between Thursday or Friday, and I was getting got. I'll just say that. And I had to prioritize work, and, it is what it is. But I want to shout out a conversation that we had earlier this year with Judge Koval with Madison Municipal Courts. He kind of talked us through contesting a ticket. And I have to say that I ended up being able to use that process and reference back to that conversation and successfully contested a ticket. And that made me really happy and made me love the system much, much more. And because I had a valid reason, a human reason for why I could not comply with the 48-hour street storage rules that got me. And life, you get a late fee, that sort of thing. I contacted them, and they were so empathetic, gracious, understanding everything that he said they are in that conversation. They are. So everyone cares about parking if you have to deal with it, right? Like, you had this story in the newsletter, and you hear from people all the time, right?
100%. You know, this is an issue that like people want to know about. You know, like one last parking anecdote from myself. You know, sometimes like you do have to prioritize work. There was one time when I was working as a server at a restaurant on State Street, and I was running late for a double, and there was one spot left in the lot that I normally park in. And I was like, I'm already late. I'm taking this spot. The spot was for compact vehicles only. I drive like a mid-size SUV, clearly not a compact vehicle. I knew this going into the spot. So I had planned to move my car after the end of my first shift so I could go into the double being like feeling okay. And when I went out to move my car, there was a ticket on my windshield and I was like, ugh,
of course,
they got me, rightfully so. But I went to look at the ticket and the parking attendant had just written, biggest compact car I've ever seen. And it was like a $0 ticket. And I was like, shout out to you.
That's nice.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. So I just left my car in the spot for the rest of my shift. And I was like, karma has been good to me today. I appreciate this.
Karma
like,
is a god.
Shout out to whoever did this to me. Yeah, literally. Karma is sometimes a parking enforcement officer. And I appreciate you, whoever did that to me in 2022, I think it was. I really appreciate you.
So we're going to throw the how to contest a parking ticket conversation in our show notes. And we last month had a really great conversation with Madison Street Superintendent Charlie Romines about winter parking. So we'll throw both of those in our show notes. And quite frankly, I'm just glowing from having been able to like beautifully contest that parking ticket in just such a human way. And Hayley, you know, I heard from you that there's something happening on Monroe Street that is leaving tons of people's hearts full of glee. What is that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. If you take a trip down Monroe Street, you will see it right away. It is full on Santa apocalypse on Monroe Street. There are more than a dozen inflatable Santas that are just lining the front yards of Monroe Street. And this is something that like people had written me emails about it. They're like, are you covering this? Like, do you know what's going on? Like, why are there so many Santas? And so I was like, all right, well, now I got to go see the Santas for myself. And so, you know, like having the opportunity of being able to work remotely, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to the Collectivo on Monroe Street and like go see what this Santa deal is all about.
Hayley is on the scene.
We're on the scene. I left my house for once. I was driving down there and I was like, where are these Santas? And then suddenly it's like, you just like get past one block and I was like, oh, there they are, like audibly, just like, oh my God, like they are everywhere. And like truly they're massive, you know? So like they're 12-foot inflatable Santas and they all are exactly the same. So like basically the neighborhood came together and said, we're all going to get these Santas. If you want in on it, like go for it. And it's a tradition, quote unquote. I don't know how long something has to go on in order for it to be a true tradition, but this is the second year that the neighborhood has been doing it. It started last year when a couple of neighbors, they were watching Hallmark movies together and just like thought of this kind of kitschy, cute idea, be like, well, I'll get this Santa thing if you get this Santa thing, you know? And so again, it started off with like 5 neighbors that did it on Monroe Street last year. And then they went to do it again this year and more people have just been joining. And like, it's become this kind of like cute little neighborhood bonding experience for the folks over on Monroe, which I really, really love. And it's something too that like everyone has been able to participate in, you know, like I am now, you know, everyone's resident Jewish friend. If you don't have a Jewish friend, hi, it's me. You're welcome. But there are also like blow up polar bears and someone put a blow up dragon and someone else has like a blow up T-Rex that's eating Santa Claus. And I was like, I like this house. This is kind of fun. But it's something that everyone has been able to get in on. It's something that like the whole community has been able to enjoy. I will say, like, shout out to the broadcast news journalists because they were really quick to get on this story. This is such a visual story. If you want to see what we're talking about, I literally just wrote about it for the newsletter. You can find that at madison.citycast.fm. And I just have a bunch of these Santa photos online because like it's insane. And
did it creep you out at all?
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
12
like,
foot,
yes.
feet tall Santa? I don't know, man. That's double me.
It's literally when I was first approaching, like going down the street, like it was kind of ominous, like they're watching you. Like it's kind of menacing. They're like the neighborhood watch on Monroe Street is 12-foot tall Santa.
Wow.
And they're doing a great job. They're doing a really great job guarding and protecting these houses. So it's been a really fun thing to like have people again like come into my inbox and be like, did you see there's another Santa? I think the last time someone sent me an email, there was like, there's 15 Santas out there now. Like, are you going to write about that? And I'm like, I'm working on it.
I'm getting over there, y'all. I'm going. I want to see them now. Are any of them black?
I did not see
I want
any
a black Santa,
Santas.
dear Monroe Street. Or dear Santa, please show up as black on front of one of this. Well, I was going to ask you, because Hayley, you're Jewish like you mentioned, and you're even enjoying this Santa stuff. So it must be
fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, and also Hanukkah started this week, so happy Hanukkah to all who celebrate.
Yes.
Yay. And I love it. Like in the scheme of things, I don't know if people really know this, but like Hanukkah is like a pretty minor holiday on the Jewish calendar. Like it is not our Christmas equivalent. It's just kind of like taken on that role because it's kind of convenient, like it makes more sense for people to want to do Hanukkah things because people are already doing Christmas things, like it's kind of become the secular Jewish Christmas as Hanukkah.
I was invited to a Christmaka this Saturday, and for latkes, and also sometime next week. So it's like for latkes, I'm gonna be latke rich.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So like it's fun, and Hanukkah is always like I used to complain to my mom. I was like, Hanukkah is the festival of lights. Like, why do all of like the people celebrating Christmas have all these lights in their yard? I'm like, this is our holiday. Like, these are our lights. So I would always like to pretend that like people with the lights and whatnot and the big blow ups, like they were actually celebrating Hanukkah. I was like, you're celebrating Hanukkah and you didn't even know it. You can't really stretch that argument with all of the inflatable Santas maybe, but there's something for everyone. And again, like it's just a weird neighborhood bit that anyone can enjoy. Like these Santas, they're fun and jolly, and I think if you stare at them for too long, like they steal part of your soul, perhaps. Like it's just
as if goosebumps.
It's fun. It's a fun thing. It's a fun thing, and if you think about it for too long, it maybe gets a little creepy. But overall,
but it's light, and shout out to Monroe Street. Y'all are rocking it. Well, that does it for our roundup. Hayley, thank you so much for rounding up the news with me this week.
Yes, Bianca, it's been a pleasure. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Yes, we'll do it next week.
Next week, maybe.
That's Hayley Sperling, our newsletter editor. That's all for today here on City Cast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. Molly Stentz is our executive producer. This week, the show is produced by Xandra McMahon, A.K. Almoman, Dylan Brogan, and Lizzie Goldsmith. Our theme music is by Carl Christensen. Hayley Sperling is your newsletter editor. Don't forget, you can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter, Madison Minutes. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with someone you know who could use some belief in Santa Claus? Also, shout out to Mrs. Claus. See you back here Monday morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, have a good weekend.